Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Walters. I'll be your host today in this breakout session. We're going to wait just about 30 seconds and give people a chance to join us. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties there with my camera. All right. Hopefully you're in the right place. My name is Jamie Walters, and we are talking about reducing burnout today in the workplaces. So this is our agenda for the next 50 minutes or so. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and we're going to talk about burnout within you. And I will share a little bit about what does the research look like on burnout and social work. And we will talk about solutions workers want. We'll have a little bit of time for reflection and then time to answer any questions that you might have. Feel free at any point to unmute or raise your hand to ask a question. If there's several people here today, looks like we have 30 in this breakout. So, but I'm happy to answer questions, and I think you can also put them in the chat if you would like to do that as well. All right, so just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm an assistant professor at USU in the Department of Social Work, and I'm the director of our Transforming Communities Institute, which is the host in partnership today with the Department of Social Work. And then I'm also the program coordinator for our BSW program in Logan. Part of my job as an assistant professor is to do research, and my area of expertise is rural communities and organizations, nonprofit organizational capacity, and social worker well-being. So this presentation actually combines a lot of those things, and I look forward to sharing with you today on these topics. When I was a PhD student, my colleagues and I in my cohort, we had very similar stories about working in agencies as social workers, and all the things that we had in common were usually not positive in nature. And many of those were related to feeling not satisfied or being burnt out in the positions that we had. So we ended up we wanted to collaborate together on research, even though in general we had very different interests in research. And so we ended up spending, about 4 years doing research together on job satisfaction and burnout and organizational commitment and social workers in the United States. And so these two articles are two articles that we published. We have a couple of more, but these are two that are, I think, most relevant to our conversation today. You can access these articles by going to my Google Scholar page, and then you can click directly in those links, and it'll take you to the PDFs that are available in the USU repository. Or if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to provide those to you as well. So what we're going to do now is we certainly don't have time to do introductions of everyone, but I would love to hear from you what what kind of role you're in your organization. So this is how you join this poll. So you can, if you're on a computer, you can go to pollev.com and enter Jamie Walters 283. Or you can go to, if you're on your phone, you can join by text, and you type Jamie Walters 283-237-607. And this will allow you to answer the poll. So if you'll go ahead and do that, and in that, you're going to tell me what your job title is. And we have a couple of more things that we're going to do with this particular feature. So if everyone will do that, that will be helpful. So I can see who's here, and then we're going to do a short burnout assessment next. So go ahead and plug that in. Can everyone see that okay? Or questions about how to get into the poll? Okay, we're starting to get some. All right, as the instructions are still at the top of the screen, but you can see the responses coming in. So clinical therapist, social work manager, LCSW, mental health, leadership, MCOT, oncology. Excellent. All right, so we have a good mix of people here today, from those of you who are doing individual level services to those of you who are in more leadership roles. So that's great, because we will talk about reducing burnout from the perspective of both of those levels. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to head back to the slideshow, and before we go into the assessment, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the assessment, and I promise that it won't be too painful. So what is burnout? And most of you know this, but just as a reminder, it's a state of emotional and physical exhaustion resulting from an ongoing imbalance of stress and coping resources. And of course, burnout can occur in all aspects of your life. But often when we talk about it, we're talking about it in relation to the type of work that we're doing. So the assessment that I'm talking about today is called the Copenhagen Burnout Inventory, or CBI for short. It's a 19-item questionnaire, so it's really short. It's in the public domain, which means that your organization can use it at no cost. You can't publish it, of course. You can't claim it as your own, but you can administer it in your organization for no cost. It's really short. It's 3 to 5 minutes, and for the entire scale, and it's easy to do. It looks at personal burnout, which is I think it's items related to their personal life. Work-related burnout, certainly that's related to the work environment itself, or how the person feels about the work environment. And then client-related burnout. Certainly this last one is more appropriate for people who have a client load, who are working on the individual level. In our research, we found that that last subscale isn't as relevant for people who are in a leadership role or more of a macro social work type of role. But in general, what we were interested in examining was that when we looked for burnout instruments, there were lots of them, right? There were really good ones. MBI is a good one, but a lot of them cost money to use. And so my work with small nonprofits, especially, they can't afford to purchase those instruments. And so we were looking for one that was public domain, and this is one. And it had been used in other countries and worked well with other types of professions that were similar, things like nursing or teaching, but it had not been used in the United States with social workers. And so we looked at the utility of that for social workers in the United States, and it works really well. Really high reliability, and and again, free. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to take the work-related burnout subscale, and we'll take just a few minutes, and I will not see your answers. So anything that you share, I can't see who's responding to what. So again, if you'll just get your phone back out. Oops, sorry. And so we're going to actually take this subscale, this subscale related to work-related burnout, and see where you all are, and then talk about that. So the first one here is your work emotionally exhausting? So it starts at to a very high degree with A and to a very low degree E. Okay, so you can still continue to answer, but you can see where this one lands. So mostly to a high degree, next somewhat, and then to a very high degree is next. Okay, looking at the next question. Do you feel burnout because of your work? To a very high degree, all the way down to E, to a very low degree. Okay, so you can see, pretty evenly, just, well, more answers coming in. Somewhat looks like the leading answer. Okay, thank you for that. All right, let's look at this next one. Does your work frustrate you? To a very high degree, down to a very low degree with E. Okay, so somewhat, and then to a high degree next, and to a low degree. Okay. All right, next one here. All right, do you feel worn out at the end of the working day? Always with A, and never, almost never with E. Okay. So sometimes. You all are less burnt out than the last group. All right, so always and sometimes. Good. All right. And this next one here. Are you exhausted in the morning at the thought of another day at work? Okay. Take a look at the responses here. Seldom, 24%. Actually, look pretty good, pretty even distribution here for the first 4 answers. Okay. Good. All right, and not wanting to move on. Let's see what's going on here. Okay, come on, little scale, let's go. Here we go. Sorry, it's being really slow for some reason. Okay, here we go. Are you exhausted in the morning? Oh, that's the same question. Sorry. Those of you who are in Cache County, I'm going to guess that your kid is also home and probably playing Minecraft and jeopardizing your Wi-Fi. Do you feel that every working hour is tiring for you? Seldom. Good. Okay, so seldom on that one. And then let's go to the last one here. All right, do you have enough energy for family and friends during leisure time? Okay. So with this one, also pretty evenly distributed, but sometimes, okay. All right. Well, thank you all for doing that. And again, part of the reason I wanted to share that with you today is so that you know that that's an option for you to use in your organization. Certainly, it takes way less time whenever I'm not reading the question to you and you're by yourself and not dealing with technology. But again, about 3 to 5 minutes, and it's available, online, or I'm happy to send it to you as well. So let's talk a little bit about research on burnout and social workers. So none of this will be a surprise to most of you. And honestly, in the past 10 years, research on burnout hasn't changed a whole lot, which is a little depressing. In fact, it just got worse because of COVID. And so I think that speaks to why this is so important. And I'm going to assume probably why, we, in your organization, if you're struggling to fill these positions or you're losing people, this research is pretty relevant to that. So, as you know, social workers are vulnerable to burnout because the working conditions are, difficult and they're emotionally draining. And these types of jobs require people to multitask and, carry high caseloads and a lot of times, or it feels like most of the time when I talk to people in the field, that they don't have enough resources to be able to do those types of jobs. The reason that, of course, this is so important is because burnout is associated with mental and physical health problems in individuals. It also impacts the quality of services that we're providing in our agencies. And as I mentioned, it's increasing turnover. So when we're thinking about turnover specifically at the micro level and thinking about individual caseloads, what's happening is when people leave the agency, then they're being passed to another provider, and then that person has to turn around and form a new relationship with a new provider, and then if they don't do that, then they leave the agency, and then that impacts the client's ability to impact services. So it's this very kind of vicious cycle or process, and that's not good in terms of thinking about other impacts that it has on society. But if we're thinking about turnover in terms of leadership, those people who are in director levels or manager levels, when people leave those leadership positions, it's usually a pretty major loss for the organization to have to hire a new person in. It's also a loss of institutional knowledge and memory, especially if a person's been around for a long time and it was unexpected and they leave. And a lot of times organizations don't document things well. And so that person takes that information with them. And then, of course, it impacts the people that are below them in that they're supervising, which in a lot of ways, it's impacting employee performance. And then it trickles down to the ability to provide services effectively. So as I mentioned, the research hasn't changed a whole lot in the past 10 years. You can see on the side here where I say reasons leading to social work burnout. One of the things that's really key here is the workload and how many projects a person's juggling, how many clients they're seeing. It doesn't really matter if you're on the micro level, meso level, or macro level. It's just about, how many hours are you working? How many things are you juggling? And your ability to manage that. So satisfaction with workload is connected to work-related burnout. So the lower your satisfaction, the higher your burnout rate is going to be, or the higher level of burnout you're going to have. What we found, though, in our study from 2018, I believe is when it was, that actually the thing that was more impactful was the satisfaction with the organizational environment. So what's included in that? Well, a lot of things. Workplace culture and climate, support from coworkers and supervisors, recognition for the type of work that you're doing, the autonomy that you have over your position, increased compensation. So how much money are you making and what benefits do you have? The flexibility of your schedule, and then professional development. So we found that all of these things have a bigger impact on burnout and job satisfaction compared to some of the other things like workload and also client-related burnout. So client-related burnout was actually what we're finding is that clients really weren't the cause of burnout as much as things like their workplace was the cause of their burnout. And so as social workers in the social work discipline, this has been a topic for a very long time. It's talking about self-care or, valuing self-care is a part of our values and ethics. And so whenever the pandemic hit, this became more of a national conversation or international conversation, really, whenever the public started recognizing that people in positions of providing health and human services were, leaving because it was too much. Like it literally was killing them. And so the Office of the U.S. Surgeon General now has like a website dedicated to addressing burnout in the health sector. So if you were to, sort of compare looking at especially that workplace and learning environment on this figure here and organizational level, these things are very similar to the things that we identified and other researchers identified years before the pandemic. So we're just starting now to recognize that burnout exist in all kinds of disciplines, and there's a lot of similarities. And so perhaps it's time that we start addressing why these things are happening and how they're occurring and what do we need to do about them. Okay, so I'm going to pause here for a second and feel free to unmute or put into the chat if you'd like. What are some other ways that burnout might be occurring in your organization, or why is it happening in your organization? Anyone? Okay, got a few comments here. All right, so unhappy coworkers. Okay, not helping each other, take time off. Yeah. Lots of complaining and negative discussions, making it difficult to stay positive. Yeah. And unrealistic workloads and expectations, high caseloads, can't see clients as often as possible, pressure on productivity, high caseloads, low pay, high turnover rate, paperwork, caseload, failure to respect boundaries, clients demand a lot and are not grateful. Yeah, that's a lot of really hard stuff. Okay. Taking time equals more work before and after. Oh, I hate hearing that. Unrealistic expectations from other professionals in the field. No PTO. Yeah, that's major problem. Okay. Well, let's talk about what we can do. So before we get into like the more serious stuff, I'll just if you're on Instagram, apparently they've picked up on the fact that this is an interest of mine, so I get these reels on occasion. So here's this one. It'll load maybe. Now I'm like fully aware that like social workers love free food. I mean, we're not going to turn down free pizza, but in lieu of getting a raise, and then let's see if this one will work. Maybe. Okay, turn.
How are you today, Brenda? I am working hard. Thank you. Are you feeling all right? It's something I can't power through. You know, you have paid sick days that are part of your total compensation. I don't need it. I am fine to work. I encourage you to take them when you're feeling under the weather. Too much work to get through today. You're likely to feel ill longer if you don't take the time to rest and take care of yourself. There's no time to rest. Work isn't going to crumble if you take the day off, Brenda. Your productivity will actually benefit from rest. Please take the rest of the day off and feel better. The work will still be here for you tomorrow morning. Okay. Warm regards, Tracy. Warm regards, Brenda.
Okay. Using your emoticons or putting in the chat, how many of you go to work sick or like power through sickness to do your work? None of you? Okay. How many of you leave PTO on the table? Yeah. Every year. Okay. All right. Well, so where do we start? First, I want to acknowledge that context matters. I'm not naive enough to believe that that every agency is created equal, that every agency has the same level of resources, that every agency has the ability to, or people within the agency have the ability to impact change as much as they might be able to in another type of agency. So certainly, I think when we go through this, like I'm fully aware that that matters. And also I think that it's a part of thinking about how to navigate these types of solutions and implementing them. So where do we start? Well, I've already talked about assessment and, assessing burnout. I think that it's safe to say that because social workers and social and human service type of roles or health type roles involve a lot of, high caseloads, as I went over, a lot of stressful type of work, that there's probably some level of burnout. But I think it's important, not just so that you know for sure how much it's happening in your organization, but to what extent. This assessment also helps employees recognize that that you recognize, if you're a leader, especially, that burnout is an issue in your organization and you're interested in figuring out how to deal with it. So to understand the magnitude, I think the best approach really is to use a mixed methods approach. And so what that means is that you might do something like a quantitative approach where you would first do like the CBI assessment with your organization, and then do more of an open-ended survey or focus groups or something like that, so that you can hear about their experiences and ideas for solutions. And then what sometimes people that are doing these types of initiatives forget is to be transparent with the results. So once this happens, you do this work, this assessment work, it's important to share back with the organization and the people who participated in this, what were the results, what happened? And as you can imagine, some of it is going to be negative, and you have to be okay with that. The thing is that people are talking about it anyway. You saw in the chat, like, that there's a lot of discussion about negative things and how this is impacting people. So they're already talking about it. So there's not a lot of harm in sort of sharing, like, okay, this is where we're at as an organization, and we need to figure out where to go from here. In that process, after you do the assessment, it's important that if you're going to think about implementing solutions, that you have a group of people that are participating in solution building, that this should not be a top-down process. This should be a process that is representative of the organization and the different levels within the organization. And that's because that the way that people in a leadership position may experience burnout may be different than the way that somebody who is at the case manager level may be experiencing burnout. And a solution that works for a case manager may not work for a person that's in the leadership position. So having those different perspectives is really key. And a part of the discussions with solution building and at the organizational level is talking about feasibility. And it goes back to that context piece of, what kind of organization are we working in, and what are our limitations? What kinds of resources are available to build solutions and address these issues within our organization? And I think it's also important to recognize here too that when we're thinking about solutions, we have to also realize that the issue is very complex. Just like the issues that we address with individual clients at the community level, burnout within an organization is also very complex, and there are lots of things that contribute to the issue itself. So it may be that you can do one thing, but it may not get to the root of the problem because it's very deep-seated, and there's other things that impact it that may be out of your control. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do anything. It just means that perhaps there are barriers that you might have to think about, and do I go around that barrier? Do I, push that barrier head on? What do I do with this? So in this graphic, this is another one from the Office of the U.S. Surgeon General, which I felt like was really relevant for this conversation, was just looking at sort of at the bottom, you see the roots and how all of these things impact the people providing services. And then at the top here, some of the solutions that, or some of the things that we need to address to help deal with burnout. So things like leadership commitment and reducing administrative burden, building safe and inclusive environments, et cetera. So more concretely, so these are some things that have been out in previous research, and certainly some things that have come to light as a result of COVID. And so we're going to talk about some of these, and then I'm going to see what kind of ideas you have as well. So the first thing that I want to say is with these concrete ideas is that, and when we're putting forth solutions, is that is genuineness, especially in a leadership position. If you are sort of on this path to try to address burnout in your organization, and you are also super burnt out and you are not willing to walk that path with your employees and continue to be burnt out and not do anything about it, it's going to be really hard for employees to take advantage of all these other solutions that you're offering because they feel guilty. So if you're going to address it, then also be a part of it. And then not just be a part of it, but also really want your employees to like actually not be burnt out. That's let's not make it something that's, you know, superficial, that I care, but not to the expense of you doing your work. One thing I think that is much easier probably for smaller organizations to do compared to like large organizations or governmental organizations is assessing those policies and procedures. What are some things that are happening within your organization that might be prohibiting people from being healthy workers? And I'm not saying that it can't happen within large organizations. I just understand that there are many levels that you have to go through to be able to address some of those things. So it may be easier for smaller organizations to do that work. Advocating for fair pay and benefits. I think that speaks for itself. Certainly, like assessing, like, is the pay fair for the type of work that's being done? And, you know, there was a comment about like low pay, and we know that sort of human service providers are not being paid what they're worth. And so I think as a profession, we have to continue to advocate for that, but then also within our organizations, helping to continue to have those conversations around what can we do to make sure that people have the benefits they need to live a life where they're not living in poverty, or they're barely making it, or they're not making enough to be able to, you know, stay in this position. Implementing things like workplace wellness programs, things like providing gym memberships, group fitness activities, mindfulness activities, even giving discounts for health insurance premiums, paying for a monthly therapy session. One of the organizations I worked for, they didn't require this, but they strongly encouraged it. That they had made a partnership with a community mental health center in town, and they provided a monthly session for us for free if we wanted it. So I think that was really helpful, and we just made it part of our work day. So if you can build it, if that's something that you can develop a partnership with, or like they're like, okay, well, like the last hour of the day on Tuesdays, I'm going to go to therapy, and the organization is going to pay for that. And that's just a part of me being able to be a functional human being and being able to be a good service provider. The next one is promoting work-life harmony with flexible PTO or telecommuting. COVID did wonders for this, right? Telecommuting, because we found out pretty quickly that lots of people could do their jobs from home, or at least in part from home. And so I think now employers are more open to that, but some are still pushing for people to come back and to the office. And so I think that it's something where you have to evaluate, does the person really have to be here all the time for them to be effective in their job? Assigning mentors for new hires to help with onboarding and adjustment. We work in chaotic environments a lot of times, and we're really struggling to, you know, meet the needs of the people that we're serving. And so sometimes when people are hired, they just sort of get thrown into the mix and they have to figure it out. And so they're stressed out right away. That is a mistake. I know that it's hard to take time away from your own job to be able to provide that training, but providing that effective training and helping them get situated in the organization is really going to pay dividends if you can just, invest that little bit of time to make sure that they understand what's going on and how to navigate that particular environment, and hopefully, reduce their thoughts of like, oh, this is really right for me. And then supporting professional development by offering paid leave and helping with other costs to attend professional trainings and conferences. We are like, our profession is constantly changing. New research comes out every day, new approaches come out every day, and it's essential that we keep up on that evidence-based practice. And so if we expect that and our ethics demand that, then we need to make sure that we give our employees time to be able to do that work. It shouldn't have to be done on the weekend. They should be able to, there should be time built in so that they have time to read, the latest research or to attend a CEU event, that kind of thing. Implement monthly, quarterly, and yearly recognition of outstanding work. This is so easy. Like, I know it does take a little bit of time, but it's really cheap. Doing things like recognizing employees on social media or in newsletters, or even just to say like, here's the employee of the quarter, and giving them, something small. Certainly this can't be the only thing that's being done, but like, it definitely is something that people appreciate. And then taking performance reviews seriously. If you're a part of a larger organization, like, this is typical of, part of work life, but in smaller organizations, not as much. It's sometimes ignored or forgotten, and sometimes people don't know how well they're doing. And that is problematic for a lot of reasons, but also, thinking about, burnout specifically, it's problematic because sometimes they don't know what they're doing well, and if their supervisor is okay with that, I mean, that causes stress to not know how you're doing. So what I'd like to do now is actually hear about some of your things that, sorry, I'm trying to go to the poll thing here. Hear about some of the things that your agency is doing to address burnout. What kinds of solutions have you seen in place that work well? So if you want to respond to the poll here, or you can also put it in the chat if that's better for you. I'd love to hear about what's going on. Excellent. CEU reimbursement. Retreats and team activities, free therapy sessions, nice. Okay. Oh, good. Breaks during the workday, especially after hard sessions. Excellent. Companies seeing value in conferences and paying for them. Lunches reimbursed after difficult crisis calls, secondary traumatic stress groups for staff. Team building activities. Good. All right, those are some really good thoughts. And what I'd like to do now, since we have a little bit of time left, this is a great opportunity, I think, to take the time to think about some of these questions. And regardless of what level that you're at, a supervisor level, or if you're a case manager, think about how do you answer these questions, and how you might go back to your organization and talk about these things with your colleagues and your supervisors. So what does burnout look like in your organization? What solutions are feasible in your organization? And what barriers stand in your way from incorporating these solutions? So take about 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to go on mute. I'd love for you to answer some of these, and then I'll come back together and maybe just ask for a few of your thoughts on these. All right, let's come back together, or you continue to write if you still need to, or type, whatever you're doing. So let's looks like Ashley has typed in the chat. I have a barrier in my organization. Yeah, if you Ashley would like to unmute, and we'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, I am a school counselor, so I work in the schools. And sometimes my boss puts me in charge of building morale for all the staff. And it seems that nobody's happy at the same time, which is a common problem. So it's difficult to stay motivated to continue building morale, working on burnout, working on, connection when there's so many different opinions or unsatisfaction within the job. So, and the environment, that's just a barrier.
Yeah. I have some thoughts on that. What about others? Like thinking about Ashley's situation, what might you recommend? And feel free to unmute. Rebecca, could you explain what that is?
Sorry. Yeah, it's an app and it's really fun. You can put together something. You could maybe say, we're going to do self-care or something. And there's several different activities that you can choose. And then they can choose to do a different activity, and they usually take a picture or make a video. Maybe it's a picture of nature, maybe it's them doing something for themselves. Anyway, it's really fun and a way to bring people together, and they can have prizes and just, you know, make it a fun team building thing.
Thanks, Rebecca. Other thoughts for Ashley? So my thoughts, Ashley, are that a couple of things. One, I don't think it's a bad thing to do engagement type of work or build morale. I guess it depends on like what it is you're attempting to do, but I think that perhaps you might be being set up for failure right from the start, and in believing that everyone could get to the same level at the same time. And so that's just not going to happen. I think what does work well is continuously addressing these things. And again, going back to this concept of that burnout is really complex and there are lots of things that contribute to it. So it can't just be like, oh, Ashley is like working on employee morale activities. It also has to be, well, supervisors are working on this and we're working on taking away this policy, or we're, working on providing this kind of benefit. So, so I would say that your efforts aren't, failed ones. It's just that there has to be a lot that goes into, solutions and addressing burnout, and it can't just be all on you. So I don't think it's for nothing. It's just, it may not be that it can all be done with your employee engagement. So, and I'm sure that there are people that are, that it sounds like to me that there are some people that do enjoy those things. And maybe it's not, but it's not the same people all the time.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. Other thoughts, and thinking about what kinds of solutions are feasible in your organization? What kinds of barriers stand in your way from incorporating these solutions? You can unmute or put it in the chat. So someone wrote, or Krista wrote, my population struggles with believing burnout can and should be addressed. So that may be where the assessment comes in, and if you have the ability to be able to advocate for that and help provide that assessment and what that looks like, that may be a way to show whomever that like, hey, this really is an issue. I think Krista, did you have something to add?
I was just going to add, we actually have done that. I'm a veterinary social worker. So we've done propols, we've done all sorts of things. To some degree, the profession as a whole simply believes that they're supposed to just muscle through this and that well-being almost isn't a real thing.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, certainly this is like a discipline or a profession-wide problem. Yeah, I mean, I think we need to continue to have that dialogue, and even think about, Krista, like within your organization and like what can you do? Maybe it's not, I think we have to think about incremental change, right? Like incremental change is it is the best way, I think, to kind of take away these things like a piece at a time, right? Like I might get a little bit of success and it just builds, right? So maybe you might not be able to change the trajectory of like what veterinary social workers feel about burnout immediately, but maybe little by little. I have hope. I don't think we'll ever like not feel the sense of responsibility where we feel like we need to give so much of our life to this profession. But I have hope that at least we'll start to recognize that our lives also are important, and that our health is important. And then if we don't take care of ourselves, then we can't do the very important work that we're doing. So it's hard though. Well, I wanted to say thank you to all of you for coming today, and I hope that you picked up a nugget or two to take back to your organization and incorporate and address burnout. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and otherwise, just thank you so much, and I hope you have a great weekend.